Hey guys, in this episode, I talk about Andy Stanley and the comments he made about small churches and big churches, and I also talk about healthy and unhealthy churches. And this is the longest video I've ever made. Let me know what you think. Hey everybody, welcome to another episode of Meant to Be Monday. I'm your host, Paul Turner, and today, interesting video today because I'm actually talking about something and commenting and making commentary on something that I heard, and maybe you've heard as well. Maybe if you've watched the video that maybe has been floating around on Facebook about Andy Stanley and his talking about why kids grew up to hate the church and pretty much blames it on small churches. Now, I want to put everything in context here. First of all, I don't have a beef with Andy Stanley. Zero. I have listened to his podcast in the past. I've not read any of his books. He's, right now, even my church is doing a series with him, talking about love, sex, and dating. But when I saw this clip, I thought to myself, I wonder how many people are watching this and are just discouraged by it. Now, I have a feeling, let me just say this, I have a feeling, this is just me, but I think everybody has these moments where they think it's going to be a good idea to say something and it comes out of their mouth and then it doesn't work out well. And I think Andy had one of these moments. We all have those moments, okay? So I am not an Andy Stanley hater. I simply want to address what Andy says. And so with that being said, I'm going to show you the clip. I'm going to put the clip in here and let you watch for yourself. And then because it's in context, I'm not chopping anything up. So it'll take about 2 minutes. And then I'm going to come back and review a little bit about what he said and the major points. So watch this for just a couple of minutes, then come back to me and we'll figure it out together.
And have been friends ever since. The church, for me, has provided some of my lifelong friendships. And you know what's fabulous? The church has done the same thing for my kids. My kids' best friends right now, most of my kids' best friends were friends they met at church and at school, but mostly at church. And the kids that they went to church and school with, they are their dear friends all the way through high school and college. And for many of your kids, this is true as well. For me, some of my closest adult friends are adults that I've met not in rows, but in circles. Because we say circles are better than rows, because in circles you have actual community. And it's been in community and community groups that Sandra and I have made some lifelong friends. That would not have happened for me. That would not have happened for us as a couple, apart from the local church. Now, this is one reason we build big churches. People say, why do you have to make them so big? Let me tell you why we make them so big. You probably didn't know this. This is kind of an insider secret. We want churches to be large enough so that there are enough middle schoolers and high schoolers that we don't have one youth group with middle school and high school together. We want there to be so many adults that there will be so many middle school and high school kids that we can have two separate environments. So when I hear adults say, well, I don't like a big church, I like about 200, I want to be able to know everybody, I say, you are so stinking selfish. You care nothing about the next generation. All you care about is you and your 5 friends. You don't care about your kids. Anybody else's kids are like, what's up? I'm saying, if you don't go to a church large enough, come on, if you don't go to a church large enough where you can have enough middle schoolers and high schoolers to separate them so they can have small groups and grow up the local church, you are a selfish adult. Get over it. Find yourself a big old church where your kids can connect with a bunch of people and grow up and love the local church. Instead, what you do, can you tell I'm passionate about this? Yeah. Here's what you do. I'm so sick of this. I hear this all the time. Well, I just don't like a big church. Well, okay, look. So here's what you do. You drag your kids to a church they hate. And then they grow up and hate the local church. And then they go off to college. And you know what you pray for? You pray there will be a church in their college town that they connect with. And guess what? All those churches are big. The kind of church you don't like. So let me move on. Let me just say this. Parents, don't attend a church that teaches your children to hate church. Don't attend a church that teaches your kids.
I want to say this, that Andy has since apologized. He apologized on March 4th. And, it doesn't take long because of the internet and other things and just terrible feedback, I'm sure, from around the world, that he apologized. And I think he had what I would call a Howard Dean moment, right? Where there's something that was bugging him, right? Remember Howard Dean in 2004, I think it was, when he was running for president, he had this massive scream, and he did this, it was just weird because he was under such pressure. And I'm just sensing that Andy was under a little bit of pressure. I'm not a psychoanalyst or anything, but I just sensed that there was something going on, like he just had a mini stroke in his brain or something that caused him to say that. But here's the question then. So he has apologized. Here, we forgive you, Andy. It's not a big deal. We all do say ridiculous things. But is there any truth to what Andy said? Well, I think there is in this regard. Let me break it down in three parts here, if I may. Okay? Let me get to my notes here real quick. Okay? Simply put this. So the first thing he talks about is this, says youth ministries should be large enough where middle school and high school students should be able to split. Now, I agree with that. In all the churches I've been in, I've been in some small churches, right? I think the largest church I've been in was over 800, and one was over probably around maybe 400 to 500. But the other three were all very small. We're probably 100 to 150. I'm currently in a church of 250, and one was probably 400 again. But, these are all fairly small churches in that regard, in regard to Andy's church, of course. So I don't know what a small church is, if it's 100, 150, 200, anything less than mega, I don't know. But what Andy says is and I agree with this. Would all of us love to have a separate high school and middle school group? Maybe. It probably would, from a teaching point of view and from a relational point of view, it probably works out really well that way. Except in my group, and maybe true of yours, in our small church here, in our group, we have 35 to 40 students, and what we see is that they don't want to be apart, really. They want to stay together, and I think there's an advantage to that, of their camaraderie. Now they're accepting of various things, that it's a high school only event or a middle school event or something like that, but when you're trying to consolidate, and you say, well, this is going to be we're going to separate high school and middle school. Well, most really can't do that. I mean, if you have 10 kids or 12 kids or 15 kids, you have 2 high school kids and the rest are all middle school, or vice versa, it's always a little bit awkward. And so for most of most of the churches I've been in, I have taught for both groups. Of course, I've had to curtail some things when it comes to sex or it comes to things like that, but everything else I keep on the top shelf. Right? I keep on the top shelf because I want kids, especially middle schoolers, to reach up a little bit. We also have seasons where we have small groups, where we have 6 weeks worth of small groups, and we have high school guys, high school girls, middle school girls, and middle school guys. And so and college, and it works out very well that way. So to where there is some separation, but I would say this to you, if you're watching this, there's no golden rule that says you have to separate your middle school and high school. For some people, that's optimum. For those of us that have worked in churches like this, it's not optimal. It actually can work against you, especially when you have new kids coming in all the time to be able to put them where they want to go. Like I said, I've had some rebellions on my hands when we've had to separate or do some things, and it causes more chaos than it's worth. So yes, there is a thing about that. Tell me, I would love to know. Leave me a comment below. Do you separate your high school, middle school, and what value do you see in keeping them together? Because I see a tremendous amount of value, because high school can be an example right there in front of the middle school, and middle school kind of learns the ropes that way a little bit. So I kind of like that. The second thing that Andy says is that we are selfish for wanting to be part of a small church. Now, I will say this. He does say something interesting, and it's true of the church. It's really been true of the church in smaller churches in a lot of ways. He says, you're so stinking selfish. You want us 5 and no more. We used to say us 4 and no more. Smaller churches can be cliquier. It's very hard for new people sometimes to come in and participate, especially if you have 4 or 5 families that run the church. Can I get a holler right there? Because that's happened, right? And so it's tough for, the people that says we want only us 4 no more. We don't do outreach. We won't do those things. And so we don't have an influx of new people. So this is not about small churches, I don't think. This is about, do kids who go to small churches wind up hating the church? No. I think kids who hate church go to unhealthy churches, unhealthy small churches. By the way, there are kids that go to unhealthy mega churches and wind up hating the church, or get lost in the mix, or doesn't get their needs met, or whatever it may be. So I don't think it's a matter of small churches versus mega churches. It's healthy churches versus unhealthy churches. So I think, you know what? There are people in the church that are selfish, that they don't want to grow. They want their 100 people or 200 or 150 people. They really don't want to go beyond that. And, I can't fix all that. I mean, if I'm like the lead pastor, I'm changing that probably. But, I've worked for plenty of pastors who didn't want to do that. They didn't want to really grow. They didn't want to pull the trigger on that. And so they tend to be a little cliquey, which that works against us in the youth ministry, obviously, because then the kids are cliquey. So we go from there, right? All right. So the third and, thing he says is you drag a kid to church, they hate, right? He says you drag a kid to a church, they hate. Let me tell you what kids hate. Let me just share a couple of my notes here. Let me tell you what kids hate. Kids hate boring, irrelevant messages. They hate boring worship. They hate people who don't value them. They hate people who won't invest in them. They hate people who won't open the doors to serve and opportunities to serve. They hate people with no vision. They hate people stuck in their ways because they think their way is the only way. That's what teenagers hate. That's what they hate. They want to see life vibrant. They want to see it in HD. They don't want to watch things in clunky old, black and white. They want to see things in full color. And so, when we take kids to a church, the goal isn't whether it's small or big. The goal is whether it's healthy or not healthy. And some of the healthy things we see is, relevant messages that touched. I'm so happy to be in a church where our pastor understands that and addresses our kids. He talks a little bit above their head generationally, but for the most part, he touches their world in little ways as well, and they're receptive of it. And they love church. Our kids love church. They love their church. And so, kids hate boring worship because they says that that's a boring God. Maybe, right? Kids love people who value them. People love adults who invest in their life. People love people who open doors of opportunity for them to serve. People love a church with vision and passion. And teenagers, they love churches that are open to being flexible. So once again, it's not about healthy. It's not about big or small. It's about healthy and unhealthy. The last little bit here is this that the little things that the three find. If I could wrap this up in just a bow here, this group needs time of separation. Whether it's small groups, whether it's a little mini retreats, whether it's day trips for specific age groups, so those groups can bond within themselves. They need those separate times. They just do, because it's hard. It's hard for the high schoolers or the upper high school to suffer with the 8th grade squirrely kid who's, off his meds for the day. It's tough. And there needs to be times of separation, though. So don't be afraid to tell a kid, no, this is high school only. Why? And then have a reason for doing that, right? The second thing is this. Small churches need to step up their game. There are small churches that are small and they're suffering and they got 2 kids and 3 kids and little 5, 6 kids, but they're not investing, right? So what should a smaller church do? This is just me, right? I'm just a youth pastor. What do I know, right? First of all, if they're having kids like that, hiring at least a part-time or a part-time youth pastor to meet the needs of some of these kids, right? Maybe give the youth a budget, something to work with, but $50 a month, right? Youth ministries can exist on this. They can. I've done it. Do things together as a church. Like example, combine, your missions trip. They'll let the youth and the adults go on the same mission trip. Do family missions trips, right? They can also, upping communication skills to reach their generation, whether that's through video, whether that's through clips, whatever that is. And small churches do need to up their game in some ways to be healthy, not to grow bigger, but to be healthy. And healthy churches, I think, grow. That's just me. What do I know, right? All right, last little thing. Unhealthy churches, not small, produce a weak and anemic church to our kids. Churches who, and what do I mean by unhealthy? Here's some of the things I think that are unhealthy. Churches who lack discipline and have a wild, wild west mentality. Nobody seems to be in charge, right? It's just chaos going on. The second thing I would say is churches who have no vision. It's just plodding along. We're not really going anywhere. We don't really have any goals or dreams anymore. We're just sort of wandering around in the wild, wild west while everybody kind of does their thing and does what's as the scripture says in the Old Testament, and they did what was right in their own eyes, right? There's no leadership going on there. The third thing is churches who do not disciple new believers. If we don't have a process for doing that as a church, we're going to be stuck. We're going to have an issue with that and a problem with that. We're going to produce unhealthy believers in the long run. And the last thing is churches who don't make calls for salvation. If we're not if we're not offering the opportunities in our churches, I think that's unhealthy. There are people who, once again, we went through that whole drama, about not having crosses in churches and not talking about the blood of Jesus and not, let me tell you what, that's the gospel. And if we're not making a call to salvation for people to do that, we are creating a monster that we don't want to deal with in the future. All right. Well, that's it for today, guys. Appreciate you guys hanging with me for a little while today. If you're a regular, thank you so much for being here. Please hit the thumbs up button. Those of you who like this video and you want more of it. And also, if you're brand spanking new, thanks for hanging with me for a little while. I appreciate you checking out my video. I hope you sense the love here and not any malice or anything like that, because it's not intended to be that. It's intended to create a discussion for us that are in smaller churches and for those that watch that have smaller churches. But if you want videos like this in your inbox, please hit the subscribe button right there. That will get videos like this to you a couple times a week into your inbox, and you can check out the stuff. We'd love for you to be a part of this community. So hit the subscribe button and be a part of what we're doing here. Okay? All right. So you guys have a fantastic week. I will see you guys tomorrow on the Tuesday Panic, where I have a few ideas and things like that that will help you and your youth ministry. Okay? So until tomorrow, have a great night, everybody.